Lars Schwabe and Oliver Wolf ran an elegant experiment at the University of Bochum. Participants learned a goal-directed task, then half were exposed to a stressor, cold pressor test with social evaluation, and asked to perform the task again. The stress group defaulted to habitual responses, even when those responses no longer served the goal. Stress does not just make you feel worse. It flips a switch in the brain that shifts control from goal-directed circuits to automatic habit circuits. That is the exact neural mechanism behind relapse. Under stress, the HPA axis releases cortisol. Cortisol shifts neural control from the dorsomedial striatum, home of goal-directed action, to the dorsolateral striatum, home of automatic habit. This is why you reach for sugar, scroll your phone, or skip the workout on hard days, not because you are weak, but because the system literally switches modes. Relapse is not a character failure. It is a neurobiological default setting triggered by cortisol. Today, evidence comes from Lars Schwabe and Oliver Wolf experimental work on stress and habit control published in the Journal of Neuroscience, Robert Sapolsky Stanford research synthesized in Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, Bruce McEwen foundational work on allostatic load and stress physiology in Physiological Reviews, and Rajita Sinha Yale research on chronic stress and addiction vulnerability published in the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences. Lars Schwabe and Oliver Wolf tested whether acute stress shifts behavior from goal-directed to habitual control in humans. Participants learned an instrumental task, then half underwent the socially evaluated cold pressor stressor. After outcome devaluation, where the reward became unappealing, only the non-stress group adjusted their behavior. The stress group continued responding to the now devalued outcome, demonstrating habitual rather than goal-directed control. Salivary cortisol predicted the strength of the effect. Stress literally switches the brain's decision-making mode. The HPA axis cascade unfolds in 4 phases during a stressor. First, the hypothalamus releases CRH in response to perceived threat. Second, the pituitary releases ACTH into the bloodstream. Third, the adrenal cortex releases cortisol, which reaches the brain within minutes. Fourth, and this is the habit-relevant step, cortisol binds receptors in the prefrontal cortex and striatum, suppressing goal-directed deliberation and empowering habitual responding. The whole cascade is adaptive under true threat and maladaptive when activated repeatedly by modern chronic stress. Eduardo Dias-Ferreira and colleagues published a 2009 science paper that put the mechanism on neuroanatomical footing. Chronic stress in rats produced measurable atrophy in the dorsomedial striatum, the goal-directed region, and hypertrophy in the dorsolateral striatum, the habit region. After 3 weeks of chronic stress, animals could no longer flexibly adjust behavior based on outcome value. They defaulted to habit even when it no longer paid off. The frontostriatal circuit literally reorganizes under sustained cortisol exposure. For measurable dimensions of how stress degrades habit control in the literature, goal-directed decision-making drops sharply under acute stress. Cue reactivity, the pull of familiar habit triggers, rises measurably. Relapse rates in treatment settings spike during high-stress periods in Rajita Sinha's research. And prefrontal to striatal activity shifts meaningfully in neuroimaging studies. The effect is consistent across animal models, human behavioral studies, and clinical addiction research. The most common myth around stress and habits is that relapse under stress reveals weak commitment or insufficient motivation. Rajita Sinha's work at Yale is unambiguous on this point. Stress is the single strongest predictor of relapse across every substance and behavioral addiction studied. Not commitment, not knowledge, not willingness. The neural mechanism is well documented. Cortisol literally reduces prefrontal control over striatal habit circuits. Blaming character under these conditions is blaming the wrong system. 3 steps to stress-proof your habits. First, buffer the HPA axis daily. 7 to 8 hours of sleep, morning light, and 10 minutes of slow breathing keep baseline cortisol in a healthy range. Second, pre-commit your stress response. Decide in advance what you will do in a high-stress moment because in-the-moment deliberation is exactly what cortisol impairs. Third, protect your keystone habit on hard days by defining a microversion. 1 push-up, 1 page, 1 minute, because continuity of identity matters more than the size of the action. 5 practical moves that protect habits against stress-driven relapse. Protect sleep fiercely. 7 to 8 hours is the single most powerful HPA axis regulator. Get 10 minutes of outdoor light within an hour of waking to anchor the cortisol awakening response. Pre-commit a stress protocol in writing so you do not have to think in the moment. Define a microversion of each keystone habit for bad days. And identify your personal stress signal, jaw tension, shallow breath, doom scrolling, so you can intervene before relapse. 3 if-then plans that intercept stress-driven relapse before it starts. When you notice your personal stress signal, jaw clench, chest tight, urge to scroll, do 2 physiological sighs and open your pre-written stress protocol. When you face a high-stress day, immediately downgrade all your habits to their microversions rather than skipping entirely. And after any intense stress episode, prioritize sleep that night even above social plans. Recovery happens during sleep, not during willpower. Stress breaks habits through a specific neural mechanism. Cortisol flips control from the goal-directed dorsomedial striatum to the automatic dorsolateral striatum. Prefrontal deliberation drops. Cue reactivity rises. Relapse follows. The intervention is not more willpower. It is buffering the HPA axis with sleep and light, pre-committing a stress response so you do not have to think in the moment, and defining microversions of keystone habits for hard days. Stress proofing is not about eliminating stress. It is about protecting the habit system while stress passes through. Subscribe to Habits, backed by science for weekly peer-reviewed research applied to the habits that directly improve how you think, feel, and perform. Before you close this video, write your stress protocol on a sticky note. 1 sentence on what you will do when stress hits. Put it on your desk. When cortisol spikes, you do not want to deliberate. You want a pre-written instruction the impaired system can simply follow.